Ngayong gabi sa matagusa, salamat sa Ginoo for another day na gihatag niya sa tuwa makatuon na makaampuanay sa matagusa. And as we start, may request everyone to please turn your Bible in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 1 to 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 1 to 3. Ako nga basahon. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they are doing evil. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore let your words be few. For a dream comes with much business, and a fool's voice with many words. Ang Ginoo magapanalangin siya nga pulong magampo kita. Ginoo, salamat karong kagabion. Salamat Lord sa mga pagpadayon, pagpanalangin sa matagusa, pagprotektar sa among kinabuhi. Labaw sa tanan Ginoo, salamat sa kaluwasan nga walay bayad. Kining nambit Ginoo nga libre lagi sa pagpakamatay ni Kristo dito sa krus. Sa paman Ginoo sa among pagtuon, ikaw Ginoo maghatag ka ng magkaalam. Kaya wala ikaw Ginoo, wala ikaw. Kinatugyan ng mga tanan sa ngalan ni Jesus ng luwas. Amen. Ecclesiastes. Now we are taught many times that the writer of this book is King Solomon. And we really believe that Solomon is one of kanang usa sa pinaka-bright na tao sa tibuok kalibutan. Not only Albert Einstein, not only the scientist, but one that is famous of his wisdom, one that is famous of his beauty, one that is famous of his riches. It is King Solomon. And the scholars believe that the book of Ecclesiastes, it was written by Solomon in his old age. Sa panahon na tiguwang na siya. That's why no wonder in chapter 12 verse 1 he said, is to remember the creators in the days of the youth. So, hinumduman nato ang panahon sa atong pagkabatan noon. Ano man, sa ani nga panahon, he was actually in his old age. Tiguwang na siya. No, the book of Ecclesiastes was divided into duha kabutang. In the first part, it is the contemplative or theoretical or doctrinal. Contemplative or doctrinal. And the second part is the practical part. Now, the doctrinal or the theoretical part is in chapter 1 to chapter 4. That is why he explained that all of this life is vanity. There is a time to die. It's time to born. There's a time to plant. Nga ang tanan makatupod ka nung sa pagkatigulangon na ni Solomon niya ni nahimo nga naman nga iyang na-conclude tanan that all is vanity, meaningless. Ano man sa pagkabatanon ni Suon, ako sa kabatanon, usay dili pa niyo makita ng vanity nga word ba? Ano man, valuable pa man sa imong tanan nga butang. Even sa imong nga pagkabata, we are so familiar anang bata pa kita sa unang umingunta ang when I grow up, I want to be an engineer. I want to be a doctor. I want to be one of the richest man of the world. But in this book, King Solomon tells everyone that anything here on earth is vanity. And chapter 5 to 12, ang practical nga side sa Ecclesiastes. Dili nag-start chapter 5. Kung mo na itong gibasa, chapter 5 verse 1 to 3. The chapter that we have read is the starting chapter of a practical part. That's why sa verse 7 ingin gyud siya. Chapter 5 verse 7. For when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity. But God is the one you must fear. You know what? One of the theme of this book is to fear God. That is why sa chapter 12, he said, the conclusion of this whole matter is to fear God. At ang basahin sa chapter 12 verse 14, he said, 13 I mean, the end of this matter, all has been heard, fear God. And that fear is not simply fear, it is the full reverence. Diya sa Ginoo. For this is the whole duty of man. That's why what we are talking right now is it's all about fearing God. And pag abot diri sa chapter 5, kung imong tanaw ng context niya, it's all about how you pay a vow, how you worship God, how you fear God. Diya sa Ginoo. And in this night, let's talk about on how we choose. Diya sa atong gibasa, kung imong tanawon, guard your steps, be not rush on your mouth. Sa ato ang sa pagkadlok nato sa Ginoo, there are limitations. There are things that we must choose. Sa ato nga pagsunod ug atong pagkahadlok ug ato nga pagsimba diha sa Ginoo. Remember that this chapter contains some rules and directions concerning the worship of God. How persons should behave when they go into the house of God. Ipakita o gisulat yun ni King Solomon on how a person should behave when they go into the house of God, when they fear God. How a person. That's why Solomon wrote some behaviors. Yung tanawon diya sa atong ibasa na yung mga butang iyang gisulat diha. Kung unsa ang usa ka tawo nga musimba og mahadlokon diha sa Ginoo. And the challenge for tonight is this. We must choose a behavior that shows our fear to God. We must choose a behavior that shows our fear diha sa Ginoo. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 1 to 3, it will give us two biblical behavior on how the preacher behaved when he was going to fear and worship God. First is this. Atong gibasa. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they are doing evil. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 1. That first behavior is this. Act carefully, not to act rashly. Act carefully, not to act rashly. Manang ni King Solomon dito, to guard your steps. When you go to the house of God, it's not a literal nga imo nga bantayan ang imo nga tapak. Dili. It's how you act before the Lord. And it's a common mistake. Kapalo mo mangson, it's a common mistake of a people. Kana ganing we decide carelessly, we act carelessly. We are too impressed on our own idea. That's why we decide abruptly. Desisyon dayon ta, himo dayon ta katungod kay mas nindot niya ako nga plano. Mas okay na. That is a common mistake. That is why Solomon said to guard your steps when you go to the house of God. And this chapter, once again, I tell you that this chapter contains some rules and directions concerning about the fear and to worship God. Every day we worship God. We glorify God. That is why in Romans chapter 12 verse 1, Apostle Paul says that I appeal to you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your what? Spiritual way of worship. Spiritual worship. We worship God every day with our body, on how we act. That is why I'm going not only to the house of God, but to act carefully, not to act rashly sa atong kinabuhi. Ang very perfect example ana is the salvation. Dili bot pasabot nga luwas nata pwede na ta magpakasala. Dili pasabot that we are eternally secured with Christ. Pwede na tang buhat sa atong gusto nga buhaton. No. We have that limitation. Same sa ato nga pagpahadlok da sa Ginoo. You have to act carefully. To act carefully, it includes observation. To act carefully, it includes observation. Payon niya, to guard your steps, meaning to observe your steps. To observe your acts, to take heed. Kabalong in the Jewish tradition, they cleanse their shoes. They will clean their shoes before they went into the synagogue. Before sila mo sulod sa templo, ilang ginahinluan ang ilahang sapatos or even ginahubo pagani. And all which may denote the purity and the cleanness of the conversation of the true worshippers of God. When a man enters into the house of God to worship, should be set on divine and spiritual things, not on the world. And it have the same allusion when Moses put off the shoes because he was standing on the holy ground. Same allusion. Itong gihubo ni Moses iyahang nga sa sandalias because he was standing on the holy ground. Ana gyud ni Gizon. Ang buot pasabot na is when you go into the house of the Lord, you have to be careful. You have to observe what you act. And even to offer your body as a living sacrifice. We have that very common segment sa ito nga worship service. Kapag mo ng actually, tanan nga worship service, ako makita nga pray before we worship Christ. So to act carefully, it includes observation. Not only includes observation, it includes attention. So pag yung ni yung ni King Solomon diri, to draw near, to listen. To listen. I mean, now that's not only to includes attention. To act carefully, it includes observation, it includes attention. And to act rashly is motivated by desperation. To act rashly is motivated by desperation. Paingon diri, they offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know what they are doing. Kabalo mo, a sacrifice that is pleasing unto God is given by a contrite and a broken spirit. Lahi na eh. Ang sacrifice nga giingon diri, they offer a sacrifice of fools. A sacrifice that is not acceptable unto God is when people retain in their sins and thought by them to make atonement for their crimes. Nga nihalad may para i-aton, para naghahalad sila pero nag-retain gapon sila sa ilang mga kasalanan. Mo nang napasabot diri, they offer the sacrifice of fools. Or they offer God para i-bless gapon sila sa Ginoo. Mo nang mali nga prinsipyo igsoon ba? Muhatag ko para i-bless ko sa Ginoo. Muhatag ko para panalanginan kog daghan sa Ginoo. That is why in Isaiah chapter 1 verse 11, ningon gyud ang writer, to what purpose, ningon gyud ang Ginoo, to what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me? He said, to what purpose? Unsay tumong sa kadaghan sa inyong mga sakripisyo sa ako. Napaingon diri sa ni King Solomon, offer the sacrifice of fools. They are those people nga nagasakripisyo sa mali nga motibasyon. If we truly fear and worship God, we must act carefully before God. Kung unsay imong ginahimo, many Christians act too rashly. They murmur against God. They even practice rebellion against God and make a condition. Kondisyonan ang Ginoo. Wala mo mention, God is non-negotiable. Di niyo ma-negotiate ang Ginoo. Di niyo ka makaingon nga, Lord, sige, panalangin ko para mo mga lagad kasi mo. That is why ingon ni King Solomon, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Because the house of God is very holy. So to act carefully, that's one of the behavior. Not to act rashly. Now you choose. Act carefully or to act rashly. Secondly, not only to act carefully, not to act rashly. Secondly, think circumspectly, not to speak carelessly. Think circumspectly, not to act carelessly. Akong basahan sa Bisaya, mas klaro. Ayaw pagpataka og sulti. Abi no? Sentro-sentro ba? Ayaw pagpataka og sulti. Huna-hunaa una pag-ayo sa dili ka pamusaad sa Dios. Hinumdumi nga ang Dios anaa sa langit ug ikaw anaa lang sa yuta. Kung daghan ka og una lagmit magdamgo ka. Ug kun magpataka ka og sulti, lagmit masayop ka. Because we respect and fear God, we have to think before we speak to God. And I tell you, this chapter, this segment, it talks about how you pay a vow diha sa Ginoo. To think circumspectly, not to speak carelessly. Anong kailangan naman tayo mag-una? Because we are talking to the King of Kings, to the Lord of Lords. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 5. It is better for you that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Why? Because you are talking. You are vowing to the King of Kings. That's why pag ni Solomon dere, ni King Solomon, that ayaw magpataka o sulti. Huna-hunaa. To think circumspectly, not to act carelessly. For God is in heaven and thou upon earth. We have many vows da sa Ginoo. Siguro daghan na kita mga promesa da sa Ginoo ba. Siguro ang uban nangalimtanan nato. Kalimot na ta sa uban. So ningon si King Solomon is to think. Una sa una before ka musulti da sa Ginoo. Before ka mag-pay sa vow da sa Ginoo. Why we think circumspectly? Because we are vowing to the King of Kings. Secondly, it's because God is always 1,000 steps ahead of us, ahead from us. Pag ingon sa writer nga ingon sa kay ang Diyos anaa sa langit, meaning mas una ang Ginoo. He is million steps ahead from us. Kunang pa niya, therefore, think, una sa una, before ka mo Um, mo, mo, musulti diya sa Ginoo. Anong we think circumspectly? It's because we are commanded to do it. Therefore, let the words be few. Ingan sa King Solomon. We are commanded to do it. Kabalo mo yung I'm not against. So I'm not against atong mga tag-as o pag-ampo. Ako personally, nakatry na ako, taas kayo ko ampo. I'm not against. Pero pag-ingon ni Matthew chapter 6 verse 7, pag-ingon Jesus Christ diri, kung mag-ampo kamo ayaw paggamit sa daghang mga pulong nga walay kapuslanan, sama sa gibuhat sa mga tawo nga wala makaila sa Dios. Kaya naghuna-una sila nga tubagon sila sa Dios kung taas ang ilang mga pag-ampo. Katuning mga tao igsuon nga nagaampo sila in a vain repetitions. Nga balik-baliko nila mo nang itaas ilang nga pag-ampo. Pero katong mga taas ang pag-ampo pero makita nimo ba nga sincero, walay ginabalik-balik, tanan detalyado, tanan iyang ginamention tungod sa kadaghan sa prayer request. I think walay mali anak. Pero katong mga tao mo ni mga Jesus Christ was speaking to the hypocrites, to the Pharisees, mga pulong nga walay kapuslanan. Manangon sa naiuban ningon nga balik-balik ko nila nag-istorya kay basin di ba dumduman sa Ginoo. Abi no? Ilang balik-balikon nga Lord, malagi ni gipangayo na ako Lord. O gipangayo na po na ako ni Lord. Lord, ayaw kalimti gipangayo na ako ni. Ito daw sila nga ang Ginoo makalimot. Ang Ginoo di kasabot sa isa kapag istorya lang. Even the whispers of your prayers, ginundungog na sa Ginoo. Even the prayers of a child, ginadung na sa Ginoo. Nang usa ka butang soul. Muna, you choose to think circumspectly or to speak carelessly. That's why it's on to fear God. We have to choose our behavior. Nanggingan udwa ka butang ato makita diri to act carefully, not to act rashly. Because King Solomon said, guard your steps. And to think circumspectly, not to speak carelessly. So why Solomon did not see in one angle. He sees the whole angle of life. Inya nakita ang tanan nga kinatibuk-an sa kinabuhi. And he experienced that everyone here on earth is vanity except to fear God. Tanan din sa kalibutan, way kapuslanan except sa paghadlok na to diya sa Ginoo. So igsoon, those behaviors nga dapat nato himuon. Those are the behaviors nga dapat nato himuon. If mahadlok na kay kahadlok da sa Ginoo ug musimba ka da siya. To act carefully, not to act rashly, and to think circumspectly, not to speak carelessly. Ang Ginoo magapanalangin siya nga po. God bless everyone and see you next Wednesday.